Welcome to Really Fun Math with Miss Colvang. Okay guys, welcome to our review lesson on graphing from slope-intercept form. This is a concept that we practiced about a month ago. It is the most important way that you need to know how to graph lines for Algebra 1. So that is why we have gone through and we're doing a review lesson on it, just so that we can kind of build confidence and clear up any misconceptions that you might have had. So today's plan, you need to complete this video lesson, taking notes on a piece of paper if you can. That's really just to help you with the assignment that you have later this week. People have been emailing me their notes, which is awesome. You certainly don't need to do that, but I love seeing the work that you guys are doing. Try to pause the video as many times as you can and complete some problems on your own. It's really helpful if you complete a problem and then can watch me talk through it, just to make sure you are following the steps correctly and you're thinking about it in the right way. And then at the end, I ask that you complete the 5 questions as like a mini assignment. I will post the answers later this week so that, again, you can check your understanding. Objectives for today's lesson. I am able to identify the slope and y-intercept of a line from its equation in slope-intercept form. I can graph a line by graphing its y-intercept and slope accurately, and I can write an equation in slope-intercept form from a graph. So that is our goal, to review those 3 concepts. Again, we have done this before, so I'm going to go through all of them today in one lesson. So what is slope-intercept form again? Slope-intercept form is a way of writing an equation for a line, and it's in a specific format, y equals mx plus b. So you're always going to have a y, an equal sign, and an x, and then there will be a coefficient in front of the x value. We call that m. It represents the slope of the equation. And then at the end there's a constant. We call that b, and that tells us what our y-intercept is. So what's nice about slope-intercept form is we really get those 2 pieces of information visually. You can tell right away what the slope is, what the y-intercept is, and then it's just a matter of putting those on your graph accurately. So here's the formal definition. A linear equation written in the form y equals mx plus b is the slope-intercept form. You can tell why it's named slope-intercept form because you're given the slope and you're given one of the intercepts, okay? And the slope of the line is m, and the y-intercept of the line is, again, this is an ordered pair, so it's kind of tricky. It's 0, comma, b. Whatever the number is at the end of slope-intercept form goes into an ordered pair for the y-intercept. A y-intercept always has an x value of 0, and then the number at the end is going to be the y value of that ordered pair. Again, if I'm moving too fast at any point, please pause the video so that you can do notes at your own speed. So the first thing you need to be able to do before you go on to graphing, before you go on to analyzing, is simply be able to identify the y-intercept and the slope from a slope-intercept form equation. So again, if we remember the format, it's y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b tells us what the y-intercept is. So for example, on the first one, example A, y equals 3x plus 2. The coefficient with x is 3, so that's going to be my slope. You can also write that as a fraction over 1. That would make it easier to graph. So 3 and 3 over 1 are equivalent fractions. And then the y-intercept we get from the b value. So my b value is 2, so that means my y-intercept is going to be the ordered pair 0, comma, whatever b is. So 0, comma, 2. Okay, you are always adding b, so if that was -2, for example, or -2, then your y-intercept would be 0, -2, and we'll have more examples like that. Like the next one. So on b, the coefficient with x is going to be our slope, so -1/3. The y-intercept comes from the constant at the end. So again, in our formula, it's plus b. So that means if you're subtracting b, it's like we're adding a negative b value. So my y-intercept will be 0, -2. And all I do is I take the sign in front of the constant and I just treat that like the sign in my ordered pair. So if it's -2 in my brain, I just see that as a -2, which tells me my y-intercept. Then on this last one, the slope is the coefficient with x. Lots of you would be tempted to put -x here, but that is not the case because the coefficient is just the number in front. So remember, anytime you do not have a number with coefficients, it's an implied 1. So this is like having -1x. And then my y-intercept, I use the constant at the end of the equation, and I look at the sign in front of that to tell me if it's a positive or a negative. So +4 means my b value is +4, so my y-intercept is 0, 4. So again, at this point, we're just really going through the equation, saying, hey, can I identify the slope? Hey, can I identify the y-intercept? Until we can do that really accurately, it is hard to go on to graphing. So now it's your turn. There are 3 examples, D, E, and F. Go ahead, pause your video. You can either do this mentally or you can write this down. Try to figure out the slope and the y-intercept for each equation. All right, so welcome back. On the first one, the slope is going to be the coefficient on x, so 2/5. Anytime slopes as a fraction, that makes it easier, so that's actually good. And then you have to think to yourself, well, what is my y-intercept? What am I adding at the end of this equation? Well, if there's nothing written there, that does not mean that you're adding nothing, okay? Nothing in math has a numerical value, and we call that 0. So the y-intercept, or the b value, is like adding 0 at the end. So 0, my b value, which is 0. That is also called a proportional relationship. A proportional relationship is when you have a line that goes through the origin. And this is something we've discussed in the past, but I've asked you on tests before, hey, does this equation represent a proportional relationship? And the only thing you have to figure out is the y-intercept the origin? In this case, the y-intercept is 0, 0, which is the origin. Second example, the slope is my coefficient on x, so 4. Again, for graphing purposes, if you wanted to get crazy, you can write it over 1, so +4 or 4 over 1. And then the y-intercept comes from the constant at the end. Again, treat the sign in front of the 1 like a sign on a integer, so it's like a -1, so my y-intercept is going to be 0, -1. If you're adding a negative number, it's the same as subtraction. And then same thing on f, the slope is the coefficient on x, so 1/4. And then the y-intercept comes from the b value. I treat that sign like the sign on an integer, so +5, so 0, 5. So that is our first objective, just looking at the equation and saying to myself, can I identify the slope? Can I identify the y-intercept? If that's where you feel like you are at this point, that is fine. Try to push yourself to see if you can at least graph from an equation, or at least graph a y-intercept from an equation. That's kind of the first step after this. Okay, you can also practice writing an equation from a graph. So here's a graph. On that graph, I have multiple pieces of information that I can tell visually. And if I can figure out what the slope and the y-intercept are, I'm able to write an equation in slope-intercept form. So again, the format is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope, b is the part of the y-intercept, which is 0, b. So if I'm looking at this graph, I have to determine the slope and the y-intercept, and then I will be able to plug those in to an equation in slope-intercept form. Okay, I have to identify m and b. Those are things I can only find from the graph. So the way that I find the y-intercept, or I guess I can do the slope first, is I start with the point on the left, I go to a point on the right, and I identify if it's positive or negative, and I identify the rise over run. The way that I know if it's positive or negative is as I read the graph left to right. Is it going up or down? It's going up. So this is going to be positive slope, meaning my fraction will not have any negatives in it. And then I do need to identify the rise over run. I'll do this in a different color. So if I'm starting with the point on the left, I'm going to the point on the right. I have to see how far up and down I go, how far left and right I go. And on both of these, it's actually only 1 unit. So my rise is going to be 1. My run is going to be 1. That's fine. Or you can simplify it in a calculator and you're just going to get positive 1. So it's positive 1 over 1, which simplifies to positive 1. The y-intercept we find by figuring out where this line is going to intersect the y-axis. So here's the y-axis. I know that because it's labeled with a y at the top. And if I start at the origin, I want to figure out where I moved along that y-axis so that the blue line is going to intersect it. So the way you can figure this out is you start at the origin, which is here, and you say, okay, where did I go? Or where do I need to go so that this blue line is going to intersect the y-axis? So if you see, my y-intercept is 1, 2, 3, 4 units up from the origin, so it's the ordered pair 0, 4. Again, all we really care about is where we're located on the y-axis, because any y-intercept is going to have an x value of 0. Then we just have to plug those two components into the equation. So y equals my slope, which is 1, x always comes after the slope, plus the second number on my y-intercept, which is 4. So y equals 1x plus 4. I would say this is definitely the hardest, I think the hardest thing, but if you really understand this, then graphing from an equation is easy. So let's do this example. Okay, again, we're writing an equation from a graph. We have to figure out the slope and the y-intercept, and then finding the equation is just a matter of plugging things into the correct format. So to find the slope, the process is start with the point on the left, go to the point on the right, figure out if it's positive or negative. The way I do that is I say, okay, if I'm reading this line from left to right, is it going up or down? It's going down, so that means I have a negative slope. And then you can make our little slope triangle a right angle that shows the rise and run. Count the rise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count the run, 1, 2, 3. So negative 6 over 3. You could leave the slope like that since you don't have easy access to a calculator, but if you simplified that in a calculator, you would get negative 2 or negative 2 over 1 as your slope. Your y-intercept is where you are intersecting the y-axis. So here's the y-axis. This blue line's actually intersecting right through the origin because here's my origin, and that is the point where the blue line goes straight through the y-axis. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, 0. And then I just have to put that into slope-intercept form. So y equals slope x plus your b value. Your slope was negative 2. And then your b value is going to be the y of your ordered pair, so plus 0. Y equals negative 2x plus 0. All right. The last thing that we're practicing today is graphing from slope-intercept form. And I think for this, you really have to identify some key pieces of information. So as a mathematical mind, when I look at this problem, I say to myself, okay, what do I know? And how can I put what I know on a graph? Okay, those are really the two most important things that you have to be able to identify when you're graphing from slope-intercept form. So at the beginning of this lesson, we practice looking at an equation and writing out the slope and the y-intercept, and hopefully you're a pro at that. If I look at example A, I can identify my slope as positive 1/2, because that's the coefficient on x. I can identify my y-intercept as the ordered pair 0, 1, because it's 0, whatever the constant is added at the end. And then the nice thing is that all I have to do is figure out how to put these on the same line on a graph. Okay, so what does that look like on the graph? The first thing you're going to want to do is graph your y-intercept. Okay, because the only thing you have to do to graph the y-intercept is put that ordered pair on the graph. So 0, 1 means I go left, right from the origin 0, and I go up 1 unit. So that's my y-intercept. And then we have to put another point on this graph so that the slope between those 2 points is 1/2, positive 1/2. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to start at my y-intercept. I need a rise of 1, a run of 2. So you can either go up 1, right 2, or you can go down 1, left 2. Either one of those points is going to get you the correct slope. And that's it, guys. You're rocking. You need your y-intercept and your slope. Again, if you do your y-intercept first and your slope second, then it's really, just a matter of practicing putting your slope on a graph. So for our next example, basically the exact same process. What do I know? I know that my slope is -2. I know that my y-intercept is also -2. Or sorry, 0, -2. Woo! There we go. Okay, I can put my y-intercept on my graph first. It's just an ordered pair. So that's something that hopefully we're really, really excellent at. 0, -2. I start at the origin and I go down 2 units to get that y-intercept. And then I need a slope of -2. Remember, that's the same as -2/1. So a rise of 2, a run of 1, an overall negative shape. So your options to achieve that would be down to right 1 or up to left 1. And then that's your line. Again, I think the hardest thing with this is correctly identifying your slope and your y-intercept. And then after that, it's making sure that your graphing skills are up to par. So a lot of things at play in achieving these objectives. Go ahead and try to pause the video and complete this problem, and then you can do it with me. So again, we have to identify what do we know from the equation. I know that the slope is 1/2. I know that the y-intercept is an ordered pair, 0, -1. These are the same questions from the beginning of the notes where we already identified these. So if you forgot how to do that, you can go back in the video and practice that again. And then we put these 2 pieces of information on the graph. The easier one is to put the y-intercept. That's just graphing an ordered pair. So 0, -1 starts at the origin and just goes down 1 unit to get the y-intercept. So again, I'm going to do the y-intercept first. Then I'm going to put my slope on the graph. A slope of positive 1/2 is a rise of 1, a run of 2 with an overall positive shape. So you can either go up 1, right 2, or down 1, left 2 to get the desirable slope. So I hope that this video was a helpful review of slope-intercept form. There are loads of resources on the internet if you need extra practice, and I can link some of those on Google Classroom. But after this, all you have is the assignments. So first up, Family Fun Challenge. Pick someone at your house and add a picture or video of you explaining the following math problem to them. Share it in the comment section below. I will post the correct answers on Wednesday. You can also, and I've sort of changed this up, you can also put it on the Family Fun Challenge page. So that is a really good option. The question is, how would you write equations in slope-intercept form that would represent the lines to the right? So there are 2 different options, or you can do both of them, and you can post that picture. So go ahead and pause it to complete that. Then I am going to give you a short assignment, which is after this. Oh shoot, sorry. Objectives for today's lesson. Think to yourself, how was it? How am I doing? Am I able to identify the slope and y-intercept of a line from the equation in slope-intercept form? Can I graph a line by graphing its y-intercept and slope accurately? And can I write an equation in slope-intercept form from a graph? Those were the 3 goals for today. I'm feeling good about all 3 of them, but if you are not, you have plenty of resources that you can look at on the internet. You can go back and watch this video. You're also going to get extra practice on Delta Math later this week. So really be thinking to yourself, did I do those objectives? Am I rocking at all of them, or is there something I can improve upon? The best thing is if you could identify, hey, I need some extra practice on that, and then you can go get that help from me. Get it through WebEx, get it through Khan Academy or any of the different resources. Last but not least, here is your assignment. So there are 5 equations, mini assignment. Try graphing these 5 equations on a piece of paper. If you want to send me a picture of your work, you can, or just hold on to it and check it later this week when I post the answers. So you have D, E, F, G, and H. Pause the video now, complete these, and check them later this week. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys later. Have a good one.